Welcome back to everybody. My name is Chris Reed. I am the founding director of Stoss Landscape Urbanism out of Boston and Los Angeles. I'm also a professor in practice of landscape architecture at the Harvard University Graduate School of Design. Charles has warned me not to speak academically, not to use big words. I thought you all could handle it, but for Charles, I'll speak slowly. It's really a pleasure to be here. It's a great space. It's been a great conversation, and I have some very distinguished colleagues that I get to share the stage with today. This is a great moment for landscape in the United States. The last 2 decades have witnessed a resurgence of landscape in the remaking and revitalization of cities all across North America, from New York to Los Angeles, from Toronto and Chicago, to Houston and Dallas. Both existing parks and leftover industrial spaces have been given new life as part of broader efforts to revitalize cities. You see it here on the waterfront of Brooklyn, on the waterfront of Toronto. And some recent work, this is phase 3 of the High Line. Many of these projects are actually converting old industrial infrastructures, in this case a railway, elevated railway, into new kinds of social space. You see this with other kinds of infrastructure as well. Roadway and freeway caps being converted, a new floodway park in the heart of Dallas. You also see landscape as a starting point for entire new urban districts. Not the thing that gets relegated to the leftover space between the buildings, but actually the starting point for how we think about building new communities. You see this in Toronto, some recent work that we've done in Dallas and across the globe. In many ways, this really is an age of landscape, and folks like Charles Waldheim have noted that landscape architects these days are the urbanists of this new age. Yet, as you heard this morning, parks today have a broader and more diversified set of agendas that they must address, a different set of pressures that they must respond to. Urban populations continue to diversify, and they bring with them a wider range of cultural traditions, of uses of open space, of different kinds of activities in open space along with them. And so it's really finding ways to both include the widest range of voices in the making of parks, but also making sure that the parks themselves appeal to an ongoing wide range of users, even when those users are your own kids. That's mine. That's when he was 2. He's now 13 and about this tall. So we have a bet. If he eclipses my height before the end of the school year, I owe him $5. Now, a month or 2 ago, I thought this was absolutely impossible, but I'm starting to get worried. Beyond that, storm intensities and frequencies have increased. This is Buffalo Bayou Park during one of the recent 100-year rainstorms that have hit Houston, that continue to hit quite frequently. But you have, this is New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, New York City after Sandy. This is kind of what happens every 2 months in Boston. Tides are higher, sea levels higher. And so, water is more present in our everyday. And the lack of water is more present. As Christy was saying, even more than just having too much water or not enough water, are these cycles where you go from one to the other and back again. And in some ways, landscape is being asked to cope with these changes and challenges. In addition to that, you heard this morning, local governments are strained for resources, which demands new models for sponsorship and funding and operations. The Central Park Conservancy in 1980 was one of the first to really take on, from a nonprofit standpoint, the care and upkeep and improvement of public parks. Herman Park that Charles mentioned this morning is yet another example. And most of these projects also fall under complex jurisdictional authorities, requiring new levels of coordination, but also offering opportunities for how new policies can be set for open spaces and cities moving forward. I'd also like to say that parks and open spaces in the public realm generally must remain an important forum for social interaction, for political debate, and for free expression, no matter what your interests are and what your politics are. And I think that's something that all of the panelists take very seriously. So this panel looks to the lessons learned from other cities as a way to contextualize the challenges and opportunities ahead for Brackenridge Park. We'll have 4 speakers and 2 respondents. Douglas Reed will set the stage for us, drawing on the cultural legacies of 19th and early 20th century park traditions as a way of informing the rejuvenation of open spaces for the 21st century. Douglas Reed is partner at Reed Hildebrand of Cambridge, Massachusetts. He's recognized nationally for design leadership and for his tireless advocacy of culturally significant landscapes. Through his diverse projects and nonprofit work, he passionately promotes the wise and creative treatment of our cultural patrimony. Patrimony, Charles, is Doug's word. That's not my word, just for the record. Doug is also a founding board member of the Cultural Landscape Foundation, and though he and I share a last name and a rather dashing hairstyle, he's not my brother, we're not related, we've never been at work together, but somehow everybody mistakes me for him and thinks I have this amazing body of work. So, Doug, thanks. I only occasionally correct them. Second up, Kinder Baumgartner will discuss all these issues associated with a broader and more diverse set of inputs and agendas that we have to deal with today for public parks, using Houston's Buffalo Bayou Park as an example of an open space that helps to mediate between local and neighborhood interests on the one hand, as well as regional users, on this debate between passive and open and free use on the one hand, and for-profit use, between recreational and other functional infrastructural and hydrologic roles that parks play as well. Kinder's the managing principal of SWA's Houston studio. His collaborative mindset and awareness of the effect of historical and contemporary culture is the foundation for much of his design work. While much of this work is focused on urban design of cities, Kinder cherishes his projects that provide the opportunity to explore regional cultures and landscapes that define who we are and how we live. Third, Gina Ford talks of the radical diversification of voices and stakeholders involved in park making and how these can coalesce in new kinds of public spaces like those shown here along the Chicago River. Gina Ford is principal and landscape architect at Sasaki's Urban Studio in Watertown, just outside of Boston. Gina's work encompasses a wide range of scales and project types, from public parks and plazas to large-scale landscape planning and waterfronts. She brings to each project a passion for the process of making vibrant landscape spaces, from concept design all the way to details of implementation, with a particular focus on the life and use of urban public environments. And then last but not least, Mia Lehrer shows us how a strong vision for a park, in her case, the remaking of the concrete channel Los Angeles River, which now looks like this, and hopefully someday will look something like this. How this visioning process can catalyze public and political support and spur changes in policy that lead to significant improvements in open space, both within and beyond the immediate project site. Mia Lehrer is the founder of the Los Angeles-based landscape architecture and urban design firm Mia Lehrer and Associates, known for the design and implementation of ambitious public and private sector projects, including complex mixed-use development projects, urban revitalization initiatives, and neighborhood and regional parks. Mia is a native of El Salvador. She's applied landscape and urban design innovation and technical expertise to complex infrastructural projects. The transformation of these projects, such as channelized rivers, seaports, military air stations, and oil fields, from single-purpose sites to multi-purpose community resources. Perhaps most impressively, she's personally led advocacy efforts on behalf of some of these projects as well. And so she's very much involved in leading the effort, not just being placed in the consultant and designer role. So we'll have 4 speakers, and then we'll invite respondents up for a lively discussion. With that, look forward first to Douglas Reed.